Welcome to my channel. In this video, I'm going to be showing you how to sew together this loosely fitted wrap dress. In my previous video, I showed you how to make the pattern for this dress, so be sure to check that video out first before watching this video. Now, sewing this dress has to be one of my biggest challenges so far. I had to do a lot of deep thinking, and I mean deep thinking. So I started off thinking that it was going to take me 2 days tops, no big deal. Boy, was I wrong. Now don't get me wrong, it is very simple to make. I just had to do a lot of analytics in terms of the channel. My initial fabric for this was a yellow crepe fabric. And I think you can see my progress in my pattern making video for the dolman kimono dress. Halfway through, I had to scrap it and start all over again. Now the good thing about it is that I have done all the thinking for you, so you don't have to. You're welcome. Now, what I really like about this dress is that the fit can be adjusted with the belt. So you know those days when you just want to go out and eat to your heart's content and not be judged for it? This is the dress for it. So you can start off with it being a little bit more fitted by tightening the belt. And then once you've eaten to your heart's content, you can then loosen the belt and still look gorgeous. Alright then, go ahead and grab all your grabbables and let's get started. Now don't forget to subscribe and turn on your notifications so that you are tuned in and locked in. Also, give this video as many likes as you can if you want to see more of this kind of videos from me. And let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. My name is Ijeoma and welcome to my sewing. The materials you will need are your fabric of choice. I used 4 yards of this crepe fabric, same yardage of lining, so I'll be using a bar or ponge lining, and I've gone ahead and fused mine with interface to give it some structure. You'll also need your measuring tape, pins, Tailors chalk, matching thread for sewing, basting thread and needle, fabric scissors, your manipulated loose wrap pattern, and a snap button. I'll leave the full list as well as all associated links in the description box below. Cut your fabric according to the instructions on your pattern. You'll be cutting the main and lining fabric according to the instructions. Also cut one long strip in the same width as your channels for your belt. Mine is folded in 2 here. Then mark 1/8 inch wide notches at all seam intersections and asterisk marks made. Starting with the shell, that is your main pieces. On your front main pieces, mark your 2.5 inch fold on the wrong side and press to keep in place. Also do the same for the back piece. Then with right side on right side, join the back and front pieces at the side and shoulder line with pins. On one of the sides, where the belt will pass through, leave a 3 inch wide gap at the waist point. And then go ahead and sew all pinned areas with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. At the end of the sides, you'll be stopping just above where the slit will start from. When you're done, press your seam allowance open afterwards. Next, to the sleeves. So starting with the main, fold each sleeve piece right side on right side, pin, and stitch together with a 1/2 inch seam allowance at the side line, pressing your seam allowance open afterwards. Then with right side on right side, and ensuring that the front and back pieces of the bodice and sleeve match, join the sleeves to the bodice with pins matching notches. Baste the sleeves to the bodice to keep in place, and then sew together with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Set this aside while we get the lining up to speed. Starting with the front lining pieces, now you're going to cut off a bit of the slit so that it folds very well at the sides. So mark 3.5 inches in from the side of the slit. So just so you know, I initially started with 2 inches, which is what you're seeing in this clip, but found out that I needed to cut off more when I was attaching the lining to the main, and took off an extra 1.5 inches, and that's why you're going to be taking off 3.5 inches. Cut off the excess from the marks made, and do the same for the back. Then join the front piece to the back at the side and shoulder in the same manner as you did the main pieces. For the channel gap, you'll be leaving the 3-inch wide gap on the opposite side from where you placed it on the main fabric. So if your channel gap was on the left side of your main fabric when you pin them together before sewing, on your lining fabric it should be on the right hand side. Sew all pinned areas with a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and press your seam allowance open afterwards. On the lining sleeve, first take off 1/2 inch at the hem to allow it fold in when you attach it to the main, and then with right side on right side, fold each sleeve, pin, and sew all pinned areas with a 1/2 inch seam allowance, pressing your seam allowance open afterwards. Then go ahead and attach the sleeves in the same manner as you did the front, right side on right side, matching all notches, pinning, basting, and sewing round with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Remember to take off your basting thread when you're done. With right side on right side, pin the lining and main pieces at the neckline and center front, and then sew all pinned areas with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. When you're done, trim the seam allowance to 1/4 inch, and then understitch the trim seam allowance to the lining fabric from center front to center front, and give your garment a good press afterwards. Next, we'll join the lining and main sleeves at the sleeve bottom. So what you want to do is to pin the right side of the main hem to the right side of the lining hem. So go in between the lining and main from the hem, and then with right side on right side, hold the lining and main sleeve at the under seam line so that they match perfectly, and pull out from in between the dresses. Then go ahead and pin round so that it looks like this. Do this on both sides, and sew all pinned areas with a 1/2 inch seam allowance, pressing your hem afterwards. Then, with right side on right side, connect the lining and main together at each slit with pins like so, and sew all pinned areas with a 1/2 inch seam allowance, giving it a good press afterwards. So it's now time to seal the top of the slit. So going in from the hem, pin the top of the slit like so. You'll be pinning the lining and main fabrics separately. Sew all pinned areas with a 1/2 inch seam allowance when you're done, and it will look like this. We'll finish it off at the very end, so set this aside. Next, prepare your channel by pinning one side of the back channel to one side of the front channel, right side on right side. So all pinned areas with a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and press open afterwards. Then fold and press in 1/2 inch on the wrong side of each edge, and pin the channel on the inner part of your garment, starting from the open side of the back to the other side back, stopping at the corresponding center front of one of the front pieces like so. Then go ahead and stitch the channel down with a 1/8 inch seam allowance at the top and bottom edge, and from one side to the other, remembering to fold in 1/2 inch at the short ends. We will now prepare the belt. So fold and press your long strip of fabric into two. Also fold 1/2 inch in on the wrong side on one side of the shorter edge only. Then sew the long edge and the other short edge close with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Trim your seam allowance when you're done, and turn the belt inside out from the open end. Pin the open end close with pins and stitch close with a 1/8 inch seam allowance. Now we'll finish off the hem. So ensuring that the lining and main hems are touching each other, you will however notice that the hem at the slit might not touch. This is fine. So first mark 1/2 inch in from the hem and a further 2 inches in from the first mark. Then fold and pin at the first 1/2 inch mark and give it a good press to create fold lines. And then fold and pin at the 2 inch mark, giving it a good press afterwards as well. Then go ahead and stitch the inner edge with a 1/8 inch seam allowance and give it a final press at the hem. Now we finish off the slits. So locate the diagonal lines of your main and lining slits, pin them together, and tack in place with your needle and thread at the stitch line. It will sit very well on the outside and have a little hollow on the inside. Do this on both sides. Then to make sure the inner front side stays put, we'll be sewing a snap button. One of the snap pieces will go at a point just below the channel on the front piece that has the channel, and the other at a point where the front neckline ends. So you can locate this point by wearing the garment and picking a suitable spot, remembering that the silhouette is loose. Make the mark with your tailor's chalk, and then sew one of the snappers on the inner side of the front piece that has the channel, and the other on the right side of the front piece that does not have a channel. Finally, pass your belt through the channel. So because your channel is wide, you can simply push the belt through the channel and keep shaking it till you can pull it out of the other end. And you're done! This dress is the most complicated, simple dress ever, if I do say so myself. But I'm glad I conquered this dragon for me and you. I will, however, keep thinking about another way to finish off the top of the slit. So let me know in the comment section if you have any suggestions. Now don't forget to subscribe so that you can catch me again next week. Until then, see you later. Bye.